Next speaker is Adam Savage. So Adam is a friend and a colleague. Adam and I are both on the board of Nation of Makers together, and I think most, if not all, of the folks in the room know that Adam is both a consummate maker, but also just an incredible advocate and friend to the maker community and the maker movement. So Adam was the former host of Mythbusters and is the current host of Mythbusters Junior. So that is currently in progress, and I think we'll get to see that soon. And Adam is currently the editor-in-chief of Tested as well. So please join me in welcoming Adam.
Thank you. Hello. Hello. I've been so inspired listening to the stories that you guys, those of you I've met so far, dozens of you, I will meet more. The stories you have to tell me about the stuff that you're building, the stuff that you're making, the stuff that you can't stop thinking about, the pictures on your phone, I find them so inspiring, and I really appreciate it. In case you surmised from Stephanie that there might be clips of Mythbusters Junior shown during this presentation, there are not. We started filming last Monday. I am effectively a camp counselor for 6 amazing science kids that are the new hosts of this Mythbusters spinoff. They are super inspiring. I'm in love with every single one of them. And this show should start airing in fall of this year. Cannot wait to show that to you. If you're as old as me, I got cable at the beginning of cable. And when you first got cable, there was not a lot on. HBO just showed Beastmaster on a constant stream. It's a little known fact, HBO actually stands for, hey, Beastmaster's on. Thanks, old people, for laughing at that. But one of the things that was really exciting for 13-year-old me was that the beginning of HBO was also the beginning of the career of the very national public career of comedian George Carlin. And George Carlin's first major exposure on HBO was his famous special about the 7 dirty words. I am not going to say the 7 dirty words. Fret not. Or, I'm sorry. But he named the 7 dirty words, and then at the end of his special, this routine, he pulled out a sheet of paper and he read like 168 dirty words. I happen to know it was 168. And 13-year-old me was like, wow, I didn't know what most of those things meant. But we didn't have a VCR, we didn't have any way to record it. Every time the special came on, I would write down as many of the dirty words as I could. And I slowly compiled all of them, and then added 4 or 5 that I knew, and put each one on an index card, which then carefully alphabetized them all, and put them into a little metal box, which I still have. It was my first collection, my first obsessive gathering of pieces of information. This is my current obsessive gathering of pieces of information. This is my cave in San Francisco. It is where I go to pretend that the world has order. It is where I go to pretend that I have some measure of control over that. It is my happy place, and it is where I go and I take drawers like this and I do this to them. This is 15 minutes with foam core and hot glue. So let's just do that again. Hold on. Yep. Yeah, I know I'm preaching to the choir on a deep level here. Stuff like this becomes stuff like that. Here's the thing, drawers are evil. You've heard me say this, drawers are where things go to die. All my drawers now have clear front. Add light on the top of that so you can see everything that's in there. I'm obsessed with space. Drop the mic! I am obsessed with spacesuits. I cannot stop building them, collecting them, talking about them. I'm working on 2 right now. I'm working on a really cool spacesuit for San Diego Comic-Con this year. This is the kind of stuff that I build in this shop, a full-size Totoro. I tell you, wearing a full-size Totoro out in public is the greatest antidepressant ever invented. It's just like the happiness pours off you like a liquid. I walked past the Buy Right ice cream store on 18th near my house, and the guy lost his mind. It was so delightful. But really what I'm doing in that shop is I'm engaging in the human activity of inventory and exchange. There are lots of ways in which humans are unique animals. We tell stories, we make tools. But a couple that aren't really often talked about are the fact that we are beings of inventory. Experts are simply people that know more of an inventory of a thing than other people, also known as geeks or nerds. But we also exchange, and that is really, really important to me. I love sharing the knowledge that I get. And so I like, this is my friend Ryan Nagata's build of the A7L Apollo spacesuit. It's really beautiful, and I noted that he built the top buckle for the RCU out of plastic, and I wanted one out of metal, so I got some accurate representation and made myself a drawing of the top buckle, and then slowly pieced it together piece by piece. I made two, one I could send to Ryan. This is my drawing of one of the Apollo suit connectors. The Hellboy Mecha Glove. This is another thing that I got totally obsessed with and spent 4 years replicating. Starting with cardboard patterns, machining enough to make 4 of these. I screwed up enough so that I ended up with 2. Every single part handmade over about 4.5 years till I completed this. This still sits in my shop. I gave one to Guillermo because he didn't end up with this at the end of Hellboy. And he deserved one in his collection. Oh, and when I finished, I made a poster of all of the bits and components and pieces and parts, and we gave it away untested. This made our IP lawyers freak out. This kind of inventory that I do with props is actually pretty much the same as any car enthusiasts or sport enthusiasts. This is a beautiful car. It's a Shelby Cobra. I don't know if it's a replica or not, but an enthusiast about this car would tell you instantly. They could probably tell you the engine size just by looking at this. And that's the kind of thing that we gather when we start to do this. And this is where Kubrick comes in. Stanley Kubrick is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers. Especially I love him because of his dark sense of humor. Here's the example of his sense of humor. Jack Nicholson thinks that he's having his picture taken. But in fact, Kubrick is taking a self-portrait with his daughter. And that to me speaks to a beautiful love of family and subversion that I think is kind of the soul of Kubrick's work. I love Kubrick so much I've replicated many props from his film. I made the bathroom instructions from 2001. This hangs in my bathroom at the Cave. I made one of the 2001 spacesuits that Haywood Floyd made. A wonderful builder named Mike Scott helped me do this, did a huge portion of the work. I contributed a backpack and some other glove parts. But then I got obsessed with that lunchbox that Floyd is pulling the sandwiches out of. So I wanted to make one of those, and I collaborated with artist Tom Sachs. Tom made one, and I made one. Actually, we each made 2, and then we traded one each, so we got a complete set. I got so obsessed with this sandwich box that I actually photoshopped the requisition form for the sandwiches, and then aged it to look like it was an old Xerox, and that's actually still in there along with the thermos. So I was really excited when the Stanley Kubrick traveling exhibition came to the Los Angeles Contemporary Museum of Art a few years ago. I went 3 separate times to take pictures of stuff, and the exhibit is different every place it shows up in the world, and it's still traveling around the world, so that each museum designs their own execution of this, and the LACMA's is one of the best. Each room feels like a different kind of a Kubrick environment. There's actual marked up scripts from Kubrick. There's the typewriter that Jack Nicholson types on in The Shining. It turns out this isn't the actual typewriter, but it's just darn close. This card catalog. When Kubrick was making his famously unproduced Napoleon film, he had a local history department of a school in England chronicle every single moment of Napoleon's life that shows up in print. Every day of his life, every person he ever met is cross-referenced in this card catalog. That pleases me so deeply. I feel very simpatico with that level. And when I went to the LACMA exhibit, I saw this, and I never know where inspiration is going to strike, but it struck me like a lightning bolt here. This is Major Kong, Slim Pickens' survival pack from the end of Dr. Strangelove. And at the end of Dr. Strangelove, the bomber team is flying low over Russia, can't be detected by radar. They think they're going to die. Their last mission is to drop the bomb. And Slim Pickens, the commander, pulls out the survival pack and has his men go through the components of the survival pack. There's Slim Pickens. And I wanted to replicate every aspect of this. And this is actually my first execution. I'm actually still working on this project because I'm making an edition of 25. I don't know why I'm making 25. I have no plans to sell them. I really mostly have plans to trade them to other crazy film geeks. Let me tell you, when you want to replicate those little glass bottles that all the pills came in, it's right there at the foot of the green case. Try searching glass bottles on Google. The noise to signal ratio is 1. And over several months of searching dram bottles and apothecary bottles and perfume bottles and every other thing, I started to look into the history of bottle making, and that's when I discovered that bottles are classified by their lip, by the actual place where you put the lid on, and that it turns out that if you search for 1 dram patent lip bottle, you find tens of thousands of the bottle that I'd spent 8 months looking for. It's like Rumpelstiltskin. Learn the name, break the spell. So then I was in Toronto when the Kubrick exhibition came through Toronto, and I decided to go again. Again, I don't know where inspiration is going to strike, so I'm wandering through this exhibition and I see this, the architectural version of the maze from The Shining, and I think, oh, that looks pretty cool. Maybe I want to make one of those. So this is the maze that Danny and Wendy walk through, the same maze that Jack looks over, and I ran into a really fascinating problem. I took some pictures of the one that was in the exhibit, and I went back to my hotel room and started to download photos like this, and I realized that the one in the exhibition was so wrong. It was as if someone had described it on the phone to someone else, and then it had been built based on that information, and this made me really crazy. So then I started to do the research and started to look at all these things, and I noticed that this is actually a different maze than this, which is a different maze than that, which is a different maze than this, which is a different maze than the one Danny runs through at the end. There's like 5 different mazes. So I had to choose one if I was going to replicate, and I decided to replicate this one, that one, the one Jack looks over, and I would replicate it the exact size. I figured it out that it was HO scale, train scale, which makes sense. Model makers are efficient creatures, so I figured they had to have chosen a common scale for finding figures. I made a map of that, of the maze in brown paper, and slowly over 60 hours and about a week and a half, I made out of wood, flocked, and assembled all the different pieces of this. Now, halfway through this process, I got introduced to Tim Heppner, the curator of the Stanley Kubrick exhibition, and at the end of my construction of the maze, this is me installing the maze into the Stanley Kubrick exhibition when it arrived in San Francisco, and that maze is now traveling around the world. And again, the Stanley Kubrick exhibition came to San Francisco, so I got to go to it another time. And again, I find inspiration in this, Stanley's director's chair. I think, oh, this has got to be a replicable object. I mean, what is it? It's just a couple of plywood boxes and dyeing some fabric. This should be pretty easy. I found Matthew Modine's famous photo of this from the set of Full Metal Jacket. I find a picture of Stanley sitting in the same chair from behind-the-scenes video. And then I start looking for director's chairs, and I can't find any that look remotely like the one in the film, because this one has square up and down sides on the 4 corners. And an American director's chair does not. So I'm like, how am I going to, I search every Google search I can, and then I realize, oh, of course, ebay.co.uk, because Stanley was a British citizen. He bought all this stuff in Britain, and then I managed to find these, which were close, and then I found these, which were exact. And so I bought a pair of chairs, and I think, okay, so I'm going to make 2 Stanley Kubrick chairs. And I hire my friend Danny Hills' son, Asa, to strip the chairs and make them look like the correct wood. And then while Asa is doing that, I start to research every picture I can find of Stanley Kubrick sitting in chairs. I'm a completist, and I need a complete inventory. Here he is on the set of 2001. Here he is on the set of, there's Dr. Strangelove. You can see he has a penchant for script boxes on the sides of his chairs. Here's another chair that he's sitting, again, this is 2001. There's the actor playing Haywood Floyd in front of him. Here is a wicker chair, but also with the vinyl baskets from the set of The Shining. This same wicker chair shows up on the set of Eyes Wide Shut. Here again, now Jack is sitting in a different director's chair than the one from Full Metal Jacket, but again, it still has the basket on the left. It's got a writing tablet on the right. I've never tried to replicate that. Here he is, eyes wide shut, with a different chair with 2 baskets on it. So now I feel like I'm an expert in Stanley Kubrick's chairs. The reason these chairs keep showing up, by the way, is because Stanley was spectacularly cheap as a producer. He wanted to film for as long as possible, so he wanted to save as much money as possible, so he bought all of his equipment and then rented it to himself, film by film. He also rented himself his own catering. He also wrote his own insurance riders, so that even if he was filming indoors, he got an extra day of shooting. Sorry, even if he was filming indoors on a day that it rained, he managed to get an extra day of shooting out of that. He was a very efficient man. So I ended up getting to this point with the chair, and I don't have a photo of the side of this chair, but I ran into a problem, and that is, on this chair you can see that the 4 corners are absolutely vertically upright. And in the British director's chairs as delivered, those 4 corners are actually trapezoidal. If I turn this chair 90 degrees, you'd see it's a big trapezoid, and that doesn't work for attaching the boxes. So even after spending a month having Asa strip this down, I realized I had to take this chair back apart to its root components and rebuild it again. So here is that chair under construction, reassembling the pieces and the parts, going to find the original 3/16 inch rivets that put it together. Trying to find a 3-inch 3/16 rivet is an absolute nightmare. And then I took I had to put the stencils on. Luckily, the same stencil is on both sides, so I printed it full size and cut it out with an X-Acto knife. But the hole cut, notice that hole cut in the top, is actually radically different for both boxes. I love this. I love the idea of the craftsman being like, I don't care, it's fine. It's roughly there. Maybe this one, which is the one on the left, was there first, and then this is the one that replaced the writing tablet years later. I don't know. But I did start to notice something as I started to put this chair together. Here's the 4 boxes going together. I started to notice, from the tearing apart and reassembly of my chair, I started to notice witness marks from my construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction that also exist on the actual chair. I'm replicating, in the replication of this chair, the exact process a craftsman went through on Stanley's watch 25 years ago, 35 years ago. I feel this like deep connection, like it's almost getting me to feel like I'm a prop master for Stanley. I eventually replicate every last thing, including the paint not quite going up to the top, the rusty upholstery nails holding the whole thing together. I actually etched the flower in the one upholstery nail that has a flower on it because I wanted to be super exact. And here's the final chair. And I felt like this is amazing. This actually looks really close to the original one. I feel very happy with this replica. The color is wrong, but that's just because the photo was taken without color balancing. And then Asa calls me up and he's like, I can't stop thinking about the chair. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I mean, this took a lot longer than I expected. It's because I really got all the way into this chair, like all the way in. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, even though you got it really pretty close, the fact is, there's still a lot of things wrong with it. And I'm like, welcome, my son. Welcome to my side of the equation. And Asa then sends me this document of all the things that are still wrong with my director's chair. And so now we're in construction of 2 more chairs. I went through a lot of different iterations of what I thought my job was on Mythbusters. I thought I was first hired because I was good at building stuff. I thought I was then hired because I was good at talking about building stuff. Then I thought I was a science communicator. And all these things are true. I ultimately came around to realizing that that I'm a storyteller, that everything I've ever done in the making of things has been telling stories. If I'm gluing a little greebly on the side of a Star Wars spaceship, that greebly has to have a reason in my head or it won't work visually, aesthetically for the audience. And that is part of my contribution to the Star Wars universe, even if it was episode 1. But somewhere around the 3rd season of Mythbusters, I also realized something, and that is that the episodes that were rating the best, that we were getting the most feedback on, weren't the most bombastic, they weren't the ones with the biggest explosions. They were often the ones that Jamie and I were the most excited about, like Lead Balloon, which you know, we made a floating 14-foot diameter lead balloon out of 28 pounds of rolled lead. It took 2 years to find a company that could make lead thin enough to do this. It took weeks of pre-planning to figure out how to engineer a 14-foot balloon with a material with the tensile strength of wet toilet paper. But we did it. When we turned in the draft of what we thought the build was going to be, our editorial team thought, well, this is going to be a 15-minute story. Their first cut of Lead Balloon was a 50-minute cut. 5-0. And this showed both us, production team, and Discovery that we could build thrilling narratives based only on our enthusiasm. I'm a 50-year-old man, but I am also a 15-year-old boy. And my entire life has been spent exploring the tension between those two states. I have been spectacularly lucky in that life. Lucky by dint of my birth, of where I was born, and my parents' support. And I realized that because the episodes based on our enthusiasm were the ones that were the best, I told this to Jamie, and it opened up this whole new vista for us of stuff that we could shoehorn into a show about urban legends. And explore. And I came up with this phrase that I still love. I said, I didn't get along with my peers in grade school. I didn't find my Sangha. I didn't find my people until later, until I was 18, 19 years old. Those people that I met at that point are still some of the most important people in the world to me. But every time I put on a costume on the show, and every time I go to Comic-Con and put on a costume, I'm still talking to 10, 12, 15-year-old me, and I'm telling him that it's okay. Your freak flag deserves to fly, and there's something universalist in that. And I realized that I wanted to call myself a permission machine. And this is the phrase that I love because I realized that that is what we're all here to do. We're all here to give permission to anybody who wants to build something, to build anything they want. I do not care where they get the enthusiasm. I don't care if it comes from a Marvel movie or from wanting to solve world hunger. Mark Twain has this famous quote about travel, and I think that it holds true for making as well. And I'm just going to replace making with travel. Making is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. And many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of people and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. And Nation of Makers, I remember our first meeting 18 months ago in DC, and to stand here on this stage with 400 of you and your enthusiasm in all the different places in the country, you guys are trying to lower the threshold of access so that anyone can enjoy the incredible spirit of enjoyment that we have gotten out of being able to manipulate our world and make it better. I want to thank you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. So before you leave the stage, I think we've got time for a couple questions. So is Andrew? I got it. Oh, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna hand the mic back to you.
Okay.
Hey, so we all know, at least most of us know, that you did the crossover with Vsauce.
Yes.
And I'm starting to see why
Mike too works from Vsauce, yes.
I'm starting to see why you guys work so well together with your obsessiveness and wanting to know everything about something.
If you actually hanging out with if you're not familiar with Vsauce, just go watch Vsauce on YouTube. It's 150 hours of incredible material. And if you know Vsauce and you're wondering what it's like to hang out with Michael Stevens, you know exactly what it's like to hang out with Michael Stevens. Go ahead.
The other question was, do you know Jimmy DiResta?
We have corresponded. We have met once.
I'd love to see a crossover. Has there been anything, talks or anything like that?
So I sold, in the same time I sold Mythbusters Jr. to Discovery, or I agreed to do Mythbusters Jr. for Discovery, I sold them a second show. And that second show is a show about absurd engineering and collaboration. And I hope to do exactly things like collaborating with Jimmy DiResta on a show like that. Thank you. Absolutely.
I've always wondered, I think everyone in this room grew up or watched Mythbusters, and it kind of showed that curiosity. And I know all my friends love you and everything, and I was just wondering, what do you do, like, I know you have the Junior Mythbusters, but do you talk to schools or anything like that too? Like, do you outreach to other kids?
I have. Chevron gave me a wonderful grant and tested a wonderful grant a year and a half ago to travel around to makerspaces around the country and both see what they're doing and hear their stories and be able to communicate those stories to others. Yeah, I have gone and spoken at schools, but I also, like, there's so much policy genius in this room, and that is not my area of expertise, but I consider it my duty to keep being in the shop and keep doing and communicating the stories that I want to tell. Also, I'm not an expert in education or science or anything else that I have demonstrated publicly. We made Mythbusters as a show for discovery. We didn't think of it as a science show and a joke, but it's really true, is we never thought of the children. But I appreciate that the stories that, I mean, look, my life is a fantasy. The idea that I get to build these things and tell the stories about them, and that gets somebody else going to build something, nothing makes me more pleased. You know, I know that there are some people, and they're not in this room, but I know that there are some people that think if you show a tool to a kid, they'll just think of something to make. I really believe you've got to find the thing that they want to make and then make it possible by going, this tool can do that. That's how I've learned everything.
Maybe one last question?
Okay, so, and I've heard what you're talking about as far as getting more and more into being a storyteller, and it's increased over recent history. What story gives you the most joy to tell?
See, this is a complicated question, because I'm almost a human-shaped collection of stories, which means that my poor wife has sat through many of them hundreds of times. I am also an actively recovering mansplainer. I am trying to walk the fine line. It's a long way of saying I've spent my life telling stories, and it is a delight to be able to tell them and to learn to tell them well and to rehearse them and to feel a movement from an audience as you tell that story. What I have not spent my life doing enough of is listening. And it's really important to me as a practice, as a white man in this world, is to shut up and listen.
One last question. I'll have one question. What would you recommend to all of us to become better storytellers?
To become better storytellers, the best stories are the most personal ones. The best ones are the ones you're not sure you should tell. Look at Maria's amazing talk this morning. I found that so moving, and not only moving, but she showed me at least 5 perspectives I had never considered before, all based on deeply personal stories. And so I go back to, I'm in 3rd grade, I'm in fifth grade in my art class in Morse Elementary School in upstate New York. My art teacher is Vinny Albano. He's Captain Lou Albano, the wrestling promoter's brother. And Vinny Albano says, we're going to hold an art contest today. And the end of the story is that I won the art contest, but I didn't intend to. I wasn't even trying. I literally thought, I have no idea what to draw. I'm going to draw that wall. And this was like an act of rebellion. But they brought out all the drawings, and they're like, in 3rd place, it's Marie's Cupcake Man. In 2nd place, it's Joseph. And then the 1st place, Adam drew this beautiful still life. And I was like, that's not a still life, that's rebel. But I did something really honest. I just drew the wall in front of me, and I didn't put any expectations on it. So the best storytelling is always going to be the storytelling in which you reveal something about yourself. I hold to, if you haven't read Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson, it's one of the most important essays that make up my ethos of who I think I am as a person. And one of the things he says in the very beginning is that to know that what is true in your secret heart is true for everyone, that's genius. And I really believe that.